Hi, Monique.
Hi there. How's
How
it
you doing?
going?
All right.
So I missed the vigil this morning. I was disappointed, but how it sounds like it was really good.
Yeah, it was.
Nice.
What link did you join from by chance?
This one, it's a link that is in an invite that's in my calendar. It's the one that went out to the majority of the attendees.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
not the speaker link.
Okay, I came in through the speaker link, so I
Oh,
just
okay.
wanted to see the difference.
Yeah, they should be identical.
Hello, hi Monique.
Hi, Shruti.
Vanessa, I'm just trying to call into my phone because my Wi-Fi is not reliable right now. My audio.
Monique, thanks for all your help on these. I know you don't have to do a dang thing on them, but really
Oh
appreciate
gosh.
it.
No, I'm happy to help. Yeah. These are really valuable sessions rather.
Hey Elsa. Hey.
You guys have the lineup for next week as well, too, as the graphic too, standing by, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Elsa and Shruti, thank you so much for all you do on these. It's good stuff. It means something. And because we have a lot of people who are joining for the first time, we're going to be, we need your help, especially on the graphics, to make sure that people know where they are, that they feel like they've come to the right place.
Yeah.
Also on format, I'm going to talk about what the format is in a couple of sentences. I want to make sure that you guys are also following that in the chat. I know, Shruti, you're already planning to do this.
You are in the meeting now.
Hi, Karen. And Monique, you're gonna do the admits for us this morning.
That's correct.
We are going to need that. And thank
Sure.
you.
Uh-huh.
I am not going to touch the admits today.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hello, KK.
Hello, how are you?
I am okay.
Awesome.
Ooh, look at your glasses.
Oh my God, I didn't realize I was still wearing them.
They look cool though.
Blind.
You know, it's so funny. I can't do these anymore without glasses. I mean, they're readers, but I mean, I feel lost without them.
I know. You know, when I don't use a, well, first, good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. I don't use a big monitor. So I just work on a tiny laptop. So I feel like HP is going to need to invest in, you know, Botox. I'll leave all the other stuff aside. I'll just take the Botox.
All right. We are just going over everything. We are standing in about 150 accepts for this meeting, KK.
Great.
So we will be starting from scratch, meaning we're going to talk about how to be in this meeting, what it is, what it's for, just a little bit at the top so people get oriented, acclimated. I see a lot of people are starting to join early. This is an open join, so. And you're welcome to go on mute because you are tested and ready to go. Here's Aarti. Hi, Aarti.
There, just confirming that everything is working. Video, audio, everything looks good.
Yep.
Hey, Aarti.
Hey, Karen. I might go on mute. I just wanted to make sure
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
everything's working. All right, I will talk to you all in a moment. Oh,
All
Emily,
right.
or actually, Vanessa, you might be the right person to ask. Will we get a video file at the end of this?
So the Facebook Live itself is a video. We also do have a file. We could send it separately, and happy to do that.
That would be great.
We'll download the Zoom. Shruti, we can do that after this meeting.
Perfect. All right, great. All right, talk to you all in a few minutes.
All right, very good. Those who are joining, you are on Friday.
Because HP has been one of the few companies that have actually forced the industry to some accountability standards around D&I, which we'll talk about in this conversation. But I wanted to reiterate this point about action. One of our headlines for this week came from Sabrina Lynch, who is a seasoned PR professional who is Black, and her quote was, "We are tired of words, we need to see action." I've also had a lot of conversations this week with industry leaders, and it seems like many are prioritizing listening right now. And, we are hearing about a lot of virtual town halls that are happening and taking place either this week or in the coming days. And I believe HP had one this morning. And so I maybe want to start this conversation, at this moment where there is this urgency for action, how can these town halls be kind of effective levers for change? And I'm just curious if you all want to, Lesley and Karen, if you all want to talk a little bit about HP's experience from today.
Karen, you want to start?
No, Lesley, you go ahead.
Oh, well, you know what? I mean, I think I'm 1 hour off of the town hall, and I'm full. My heart is full, filled with joy. I think we approached it from a single standpoint, and that is, it's time to be heard. And the beauty of HP's culture and our leadership is, they said, we want to hear you and we want to see you. And so what I know will happen from today is that we will have action, because that's a core value of the company that I'm so grateful to work for, is we take action. Now, is the action always exactly what we want to see and as quick as we want to see it? Not always, but one thing I know for certain is that the leadership that I work for, the authenticity of that leadership, is when they said that they wanted to hear your voices and they listened, that will now work on forming something for what's next. And so the 3 questions that I asked today was around, first, getting a feeling of like, how are people feeling? And just give me the words. And then we moved from that into, and what are the needs that you have? And it was raw, and it was real, and it was very candid. And so the next is, and we'll have a series of these conversations. We'll start building. In fact, my email, my IMs, my texts were just flooded with people saying and raising their hands. And so I honestly believe action is going to happen.
Lesley, it was an amazing session. Before we had this town hall this morning, we had something that I've never participated in ever. We had a silent vigil on Zoom, and I didn't know what to expect. And seeing 400 people sitting quietly on Zoom, just looking into the camera, and watching people cry was one of the most powerful experiences I've had. And as Lesley said, my heart has felt broken, and this was the first day in many days that I felt hope. And yet, as Lesley said, she led a discussion today where we heard from our employees how angry they are, how hurt they are, how frustrated they are, that they're shaking with anger. We heard an employee talk about that he has been George Floyd, that he has lied on the ground with his face in the dirt by a police officer. I mean, Lesley says this is raw. This is really raw. And, as communications professionals, if I bring it back to us, You know, there's no degree of beautiful writing that we can do on behalf of executives. There's no clever phrasing that we can have for meetings or speaking points for executives. There's just nothing that replaces authenticity. And I think that that's what's been missing. And as communicators, it's as much as we have as a job to help our brands navigate, we also have a huge responsibility to make our brands look in the mirror and make sure that we're being honest with ourselves and make sure that we're focusing inward before we, you know, think that we're going to focus outward and make, you know, drive systemic change if we can't drive it internally. So I would, Lesley did an incredible job, and it speaks very much to who we are as a company. So for this topic today, Aarti, that you selected us to talk about this, HP is just it's a really wonderful brand.
Are you finding that the burden of action this time is being shared equally between, you know, the Black community at HP and beyond with your stakeholders, or as well as the white community? And in the past, I think some criticism that we've seen of diversity issues in the PR industry anyways, is the burden has been on communities of color to educate, you know, and really to be kind of to be the agents of change, right, within their organizations. Do you all feel, Lesley and Karen, that this time around that burden of action will be shared more equally?
You know what I think? I think that when we talk about diversity and we talk about inclusion and belonging, we're talking about, especially in the corporate environment, it is about exactly that. There's a piece of it is that how do you elevate the visibility of the talents, the qualifications of people of color, of women, of LGBT community, and so on. This is very different. This is different. This is a pivotal moment in which we have to look at beyond that. It is about how do you treat people and what rights do people have, the social justice, the racial equality. And so I actually don't think it's a role to be shared. I think it is now for the majority to step up and lead. And that's a very different place than where we've been.
Yeah, I think there's something, Lesley, that came up today, and we keep hearing this, and it's this idea of just not being a racist isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all have a role to play in absolutely everything that we do. And if you don't mind, Lesley, do you mind if I talk about our pre-session yesterday?
Sure. No, share, please.
You know, there's a sense that, you know, we all have a personal responsibility to educate ourselves. And we can't look to the Black community to show us the way and tell us what they need and you know, encourage us to have the dialogue. We all have a responsibility to read, to be smart, to take actions in our own lives, take actions in our own groups, and not expect that that others are going to lead for us. And I think to a large degree, leadership here has to come from everywhere, from the front, the back, the sides, the middle. And I think even viewing this as a diversity and inclusion issue does not do it justice. This is a social justice issue, a racial issue. Diversity and inclusion is so different. This is a fracture in our society. And I think we've hit a breaking point. And, you know, this is what we heard today, and Lesley's leading this effort. This is enough is enough. And, you know, I think some of the work that we did, you know, Aarti, I know you were referencing it early on in the D&I and the marketing community and the need to drive systemic change. This is so much bigger than that, you know, and there is no quick fix.
Right. And you know, and to add to that too, and I said this today, is this is not the time to try to challenge people on their views and challenge the data when you look at the disproportionate impact on communities of color, and in civil justice and in the pandemic, and it's not the time for that. It is the time to listen and ultimately move from the moment to a movement that allows mobility to scale and sustain over time. And so, so that's really the conversation starter that we had. And we'll, in the value of these, I think, town halls and some of the sessions that we will have, and some of them might even be closed door sessions, will be to get to that scalability and sustainability over time.
So I want to, Karen, you mentioned that, this is bigger than a D&I initiative. And I wanted to ask, what can companies, brands, agencies do to keep this focus on this social justice component? Like I've even seen, folks have said, we shouldn't be using the word person of color right now, because this is not about communities of color. This is specifically about the Black community. And we need to not turn this into some vague D&I initiative, and we need to really focus on what, the fractures that we're dealing with right now. How can companies, agencies, brands make sure that the focus stays on the issues that we're talking about today, and a month from now this doesn't get to a broader D&I initiative?
Maybe I'll answer first, and Lesley, you want to weigh in on that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really great point, because you sort of see that, issues around the pandemic that have covered the news for the last few months, all of a sudden those aren't being covered anymore. And I think it is really essential that this isn't a news cycle, because there aren't protests and some of the news coverage dies down. I think that there are a couple things that we're seeing. There's what companies need to do internally, and I don't want to preach, to what every company should do. I can only talk about what we can do and what we're doing, and that's, as Lesley said, listening. It's hosting town halls. It's having an open dialogue with employees. We've sent a variety of emails and messages to employees. We held a big all-employee meeting. We're engaging with our board. We're doing all the things that we can to make our own people feel safe. And that feels important to us. Like many companies, we're also donating money from our foundation. But again, this is not a financial fix. This is a long-term systemic series of issues that we need to remain focused on. I think for the larger industry, it's about being educated and not looking at this as, it's a campaign. It's something clever that we're going to do with our logo or our marketing or put an influencer voice behind it. I think this is a time for us to take a hard look in the mirror, and as brands, think about not about what people are going to write about or tweet about or be publicized in the media, again, because we're communications people. So I hate to say that sometimes we think through that lens, but the definition of a really great culture and values and character is what you do when no one's looking. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to pretend that no one's looking, and we need to all work on doing the right thing. And that right thing is going to be very different for different companies. And so I can only speak for what it is for us.
Yeah, I think well said, Karen. What I'd add to that is that there's a different approach from an initiative to program to process and structural and systemic change, right? What I feel very, very, very fortunate about is HP's never approached even our D&I work as initiatives. It's fundamentally embedded into our business strategy, and it shows up in the form of business priorities. It shows up in the form of performance metrics. It shows up in the form of a sustainability framework that focuses on planet, people, and community. And so we build and we wrap around those things. And so I think, to Karen's point, this is not what HP can look at, and what HP can drive and influence is first looking at our own home and how do we get our house in order. And that's individually, that's teams, that's leaderships, that's collectively. And unfortunately, maybe fortunately, in the virtual environment, it's even our families, right? A lot of the work that we're doing right now is embracing the family as well. And so we start there, and then much of, like some of the other things that we have done that really are initiatives in being able to push out and do 10% holdbacks and push the agencies, your agency partners to uphold good and strong and ethical diversity standards. Now it is about how can you influence into the industry as a leader, as a responsible and ethical leader and respected leader and brand, and then have others kind of follow suit with what they can do. And so I believe this is public, it's private, it's nonprofit, it's municipalities, it's going to run the gamut in order for the structural and the systemic parts of this to change. And that's very different than what you can throw at an initiative. And the funding goes away, so it goes away. And the moment of the 15 minutes of fame or the social 140 characters go away. This isn't that. And so we will continue to push, we'll evolve, we'll put our leaders out front in order to influence in the way that they can within the industry.
Well, and I think the way that we also view this is systemically, why this is such an issue is it cuts across education, it cuts across healthcare, it cuts across criminal justice, policy, unemployment, the kinds of issues that drive voter suppression, the way that we look at our PAC, the way that we look at supporting every range of issue for us, whether it's the digital divide and how we drive usage of computing within our various communities. There's so many different levers that every company is so different that they can pull. I think one of the reasons why our earlier effort around the diversity holdback with our agencies and then ultimately our legal partners and our supply chain partners was we focused on driving a very narrow area of change, that if you're going to do business with HP, we're going to hold you to certain standards. And it was very specific, it was very measurable, and it really aligned to our values. I think where Lesley is helping us go, particularly now, is we need to understand how we're going to drive change in these areas that are so meaningful to our communities. Healthcare, education, access to critical things that truly do make life better for everyone everywhere. And I think that's where the magic is.
And Karen and Lesley, I'm curious, I've talked to so many agency leaders this week, and many have been at a loss, right? Like they feel like they've done the right things and they don't know necessarily what the next step is. We've actually compiled a resource on our site, and I'm sure there's plenty out there. I think I've already seen some here in the comments for folks that are looking for the next step. But I wonder, Karen and Lesley, if you all can share, what are some of the key challenges that you think the industry, has faced in terms of, and again, I know this, Karen, to your point, this is a bigger systemic issue, but I think from a more immediate, action perspective, I think the industry is trying to do better, and not only, retaining, first recruiting, people of color specifically from the Black community, retaining them, but also moving them into leadership positions. And that's where we've seen a huge void. And Karen, I remember when you and I spoke a few years ago about the results, because you all published the results from your agency in terms of how well they did on the diversity metrics. They did great on gender. I remember gender was great. And it was racial, and I think it was underrepresented groups in particular where things really kind of went to the wayside.
Fell apart.
Yeah, so what, were there any learnings? I'm sure you all had candid conversations with some of your vendors. Like, what were there some learnings that you can share more broadly with the industry?
Underrepresented groups in creative leadership and women in creative leadership were consistently poor scoring areas. And I think what's compounding things now, particularly with the COVID-19 pandemic, is so many agencies are hurting and laying people off. And so their prioritization of these areas like talent management and recruiting and making sure that they're providing opportunities and career development across their ranks, it makes me very concerned that this is not going to be high on their agenda as it was, and they were struggling in these areas. I think that it's really a tough one. And I do think it's incumbent, not to put some of it on you, Aarti, but I do think that the media in our community did a really great job of holding agencies accountable. We certainly hold ourselves accountable internally and manage our numbers that are not always great, but accountability is a really key part of it.
Sorry, Lesley, did you want to add to that? One of the things on the accountability side is we did notice is there is a real pay gap in the industry, and this is on the agency side, and we published this data, it was 2 years ago now, where we controlled for geography, we controlled for title, we controlled for tenure, and we did find that white men in the industry made more than white women, and white women made more than men and women of color in the industry. And there are these, to your point, I mean, there are these structural, systematic things that the industry can do, and I think a lot of tech companies have done audits of pay bands and just to make sure there's equity there. And I would, if there is an agency that's listening that has done something like that, please contact me, because we would love to. I'd love to chat with you. I know I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I know we have a lot of questions. I do want to talk about corporate citizenship a little bit. There was this moment where it felt like in the U.S. anyway, that the public, consumers were looking to the private sector to sort of fill this void from that was missing in the government. And now in 2020, we have these two sort of crises of epic proportions, right? A global pandemic, plus the systematic racism issue. Do you feel like the public is sort of realizing there are limitations to what the private sector can do in solving some of these issues? Or do you feel like the pressure is stronger than ever? I mean, how do you see the role of kind of corporate citizenship evolving, in light of these two major crises?
Lesley, you want me to start on that one?
Go for it. I'll join in.
I would have maybe before COVID-19 in this most recent situation, I've always adhered, at least for the last couple of years, with the data from Edelman and the trust barometer that they lead, and that where people don't trust the government, they are looking to enterprise and NGOs to step in and be a voice for values and purpose and make the kinds of investments in social equity. I'm disappointed by many vendors that I see in the industry. I'm scared by security breaches, and I don't want to call out any particular company, although I will if you want me to. I think that there is a dramatic lack of trust, particularly in Silicon Valley. And that's really scary to me. And I think that is, it creates a really difficult spot for a lot of good companies when enterprise is letting us down as is government. And I think we're in a really tenuous situation. I will say, I think that there are a lot of really wonderful companies, and I've found it, there is cynicism and criticism about the companies that have come out of the woodwork, especially in the last week, with supportive statements for what's going on from a racial inequality perspective. From a patio furniture company that I ordered a chair from, to the place that I get my hair cut, to my daughter works at Sports Basement in San Francisco, and they're having meetings talking about what they can do. I find that those small actions encouraging, misplaced sometimes as they are, at least they're authentic. I do think that companies have a really critical role to play, but they have to be the right roles, because if you're not treating your employees right, if you're not managing employee data, if you're treating consumers wrong, it backfires, and it's going to create the kinds of mistrust that I think we've worked so hard over the last year from a corporate perspective of trying to play a better position than where government has played.
Yeah. I think a lot of the unrest, the civic unrest that's going on, the pandemic, it has exposed so much our, and it more than scars, the cuts, the bruises, and so as I watched the different protests, I was excited to see people, millennials. I saw so much diversity, and out there protesting, peacefully protesting, and even with the riots and whatnot. But I do think that we're now at a juncture in which people will make decisions for the brands that they support that that align to their values. And I think that when I think about you as communicators, I think you will have a different level of responsibility to make those connections and ties, see where companies are putting their PAC dollars, and as Karen said, how are you treating your employees? What are the protests? What are the walkouts? You're going to probably see more of those kinds of things occur. And so I just think that now more than ever, companies are going to really need to step into their authenticity, and they're going to have to, if they don't have the right corporate values, they're going to be forced to have them in order to generate revenue and to improve their bottom lines. And so it's going to be interesting to see, I believe, and I already see this, within the Black community, is like, okay, company X, if you're not supporting us in raising your voice or taking something down, or we'll either walk out, we're going to stop using you, we're going to stop supporting you. And so it is enough is enough, and the time is now that's happening.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. And I'm the two questions. I know we have to wrap up in a moment. But with brands, this authenticity piece, right? I mean, we've already seen on social media, a brand might say something supportive, and we've seen this backlash of like, okay, well, show me your board. Like
the question I was going to ask.
Yeah, like, and not just that. I mean, we Ben and Jerry's, I think someone even mentioned, they've been really safe. I mean, of course, they've had permission to play in this space for a long time, because this is not the first time that they've spoken out as boldly as they have. But they have a complete and action-oriented list of what needs to happen. So just, I guess, to close out before we go on to the audience Q&A, what does authenticity look like today? What should companies be thinking about? Like, should they be looking at their boards? What kind of 360 view do they need to look at within their organizations to sort of really walk the talk?
Yeah. And those things that you mentioned, I will say, as a woman of color, as a Black woman, I look at all of those things and often coach young people when they're entering, whether they're doing internships or kind of entering into the workplace or job searching. Look for companies that align to your personal values. And so it's important for me to know that we have, and HP is, we have the most diverse board of directors in tech. When we look at minorities, ethnic minorities, when we look at women, so 43% total minorities, 28% women, 21% of underrepresented minorities within our board of directors. We have leaders that hail from different countries even, and we're a global company, so we should care about that. But more than that, it is, what are the policies within the company? How are we going, and where are we going to recruit? We're working very closely with HBCUs. And in fact, last year, 2 years ago, brought the partnership of the HBCU business deans to the New York Stock Exchange and rang the closing bell. Never in the history of the New York Stock Exchange had this connection been made. And that was HP extending our hand for a partnership in order to do that. They want to recruit those students, those business students, but didn't know how to get to them. And so, so those are the types of things you have to look at. It's like, start peeling back the layer, get away from the glitz and the glamour of what are the, you know, the sign-on bonuses and how, you know, and I don't want to get into, you know, politics, but you're freezing your eggs or this or that, and get to the things that are real and true to you. And that's what I advise kids to do. Is look at that. Where are the PAC dollars being spent? What are the organizations that you're giving funding to? We're investing over $500,000 for social justice, as are other companies. But now, don't just give the money, hold them accountable to how they use that and what they're going to be reporting out on. And so those are the things that I would say. There's a whole list of others, but that's the—
No, but Lesley, what you're saying is so important because it has to be measurable. It's one of the reasons why we have a sustainable impact strategy and report that we release every year. So it's about people and planet and community, and there's detailed metrics that we look at year to year, and as a leadership team at HP, it's quarter over quarter so that we're held accountable. And the numbers are not always perfect, but you have to know where things are not working in order to drive progress and change. And you know, this is where I think companies need to be very, very honest with themselves and honest with their communities. So, I mean, for us, I think because social justice is such a big pillar within our sustainable impact strategy, this is why this particular topic is, you know, for us, very meaningful and where I feel like we can have a good voice.
Yeah,
and if I can add to that, I know you want to get to the questions, but if I can add to that, the
Give
other
me 2 hours.
The brands need to show up in the communities in which the especially these marginalized communities, right? You need to show up for women. You need to show up for Black Americans. You need to show up for the LGBT community and be true and authentic, because when you do that, you build trust. And so if you have a misstep along the way, if you're not able to deliver the product for, I don't know, a window, or if you maybe misstep and not say the right thing, because I trust you, I will still be in support of you and advocate for your brand.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
No, and it does, it insulates you.
Trust and Karen, to your point, also measurement. And that's something that we've seen D&I advocates have been talking about this for a long time. So if there are folks on the brand side that are listening, I mean, you know, look at what HP did, where they did start holding their agencies accountable. And, you know, everyone I've spoken to said the change in our industry is going to come from the client side. It's going to come from the brands putting pressure on the agencies and holding them accountable. Vanessa, I know we probably need to move into audience Q&A.
That's an understatement, Aarti. The chat is exploding. The chat is exploding.
Can I ask, because there's one question that came very early on that I thought was a great question. You know, what's your advice to global companies right now? You know, racism is a global issue, although it looks different, you know, depending on what the demographics of each country are. How do you make this movement into something, you know, global?
Yeah, I love the question. HP is a global company. We do business in 170 countries across the globe. And what we're seeing right now in the Black community for Black Americans is magnified from a global perspective. It's just right now, I'll use the analogy is this house is burning, right? And so this is where we need the fire trucks to come to extinguish. The conversations around xenophobia, the racism, the social justice, that spans everywhere, and it shows up not all that different actually in other countries. And so the conversation is a global conversation to be had. This time right now, these weeks, this is what we're dealing with. And in the benefit of any civil movement has always been that you're pushing for one group and others are impacted as well, benefit from it as well. And so, so that's what I see our conversation evolving to is, okay, it's this right now. The sustainable piece of it, the scalable piece of it goes global.
Yeah, it's so well said, Lesley. And these issues transcend, because you look at the issues that are going on in Hong Kong or in China or in Malaysia, and they're different groups, but it's a similar feeling of oppression and a similar sense that there is a lack of trust and a lack of support from government. And so they're different topics, but how we support is very similar.
There's another question that came in about balancing, this topic with some others. And, even on this conversation, we had planned to talk about COVID-19 and we didn't get to that. So the question that we have is, how do you balance efforts to focus on Black Lives Matter while still raising awareness on other issues that are really important, especially for populations that are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a similar question as how do you do this globally. We've got a lot going on, and the bottom line is because there's systemic racism, the COVID impact and the loss of jobs, mental health, health access to health, homelessness, all of those different things are all a part of this same thing around having a knee and a neck and losing your breath. And so it's just, it's all a part of the same thing. It is that right now, because of the incidences of Brianna and Ahmaud and George, and even the Central Park call 911, those are just an illustration of the racism toward Black America. But all of these things kind of go hand in hand. Brown America is impacted by COVID. The LGBT community is one of the highest in the homeless rate and will be as a result of COVID. When I think about some of the schools that we've worked with and we've partnered with for relief funding, there are students that were, when we went into quarantine and they said students go home, there were students that had no home to go to. They were part of the foster care system. So those kids would have been homeless. And so all of these things are important issues. It's the here and the now is the Black Lives Matter. That does not mean that other lives don't matter, right? It is all lives do matter, but it is that this Black house is burning down and we're not taking any more.
Mm-hmm. Vanessa, we have time for another question, or?
Yeah, we do. We have a few more minutes, and I've seen a few different ways this question's been asked. David Vosbrink, I think Sean Fletcher, our board member, and actually David, thank you for also being a board member emeritus. This question keeps coming up. How is this changing your policy? How is this changing your public policy relationships? What is happening differently now than even just a few months ago?
Yep, Karen, you wanna?
I think that it will. I think this is so new right now. These are the questions that we're asking ourselves. Our general counsel was part of our conversation this morning, who also runs our PAC. And we are looking at what from a policy and political perspective, what should we be doing differently? I don't know that right now I don't know that we have the answers right now. I think right now is the time that we're asking ourselves these questions and what do we need to do to change and what should change? I mean, Lesley, are you seeing anything different from government relations?
Yeah, no, here's what I would say that we're already looking at, and we'll be focusing on that. That is going to be part of the outcome of the actions. But here's the thing to know. When we talk about this systemic racism, there's a duality that's happening. There's the physical piece of it, right, which is the injustice to brown and black and all of that. But there's also this spiritual, I call it the spiritual, I don't know if there's a real term for it, but the spiritual aspect of this racism is that this oppression that has happened over time of being kneed down and held back from job opportunities, work opportunities. When we talk about the lack of ethnic minorities in the tech industry or in agencies and all of that, or women not being able to be promoted and rise to the top, that's because we've been held down with a knee, right? And so there's that aspect of it too that has to have mindset shifts. And so I would submit that public policy will change, but there are a lot of other policies that will have to change as a result of this too, to be able to equalize and for us to move forward.
That's a good point.
Excellent point. Are we at closing remarks, or are we still? I'm going to look
We
to you.
still can keep going. We're good. We're good. We're good.
I'm used to live event, like the in-person events where they're, they push you off the stage once your time is up. So, one question that I had was, both Karen and Lesley, you all both alluded to this, but if there's any other concrete ways in which we, that the public should be holding brands and companies accountable for these proclaimed values, I'm curious to hear about that. And then also, we've talked about Ben & Jerry's, we've talked about some of the stuff HP's done. Are there any other examples that you all can bring to the table right now of companies doing this really well?
Well, I think the best way to hold brands accountable is through purchasing decisions and stop buying from brands that are doing the wrong thing and are not treating their employees well. I think that one brand that I'm kind of fascinated with, and I've talked to Vanessa about this, is Glossier. I think it's a really neat brand in that they're taking their $500,000 or $1 million and they're putting it towards Black-oriented beauty. And it's connected with their mission. It's connected with who they are. I don't know right now that a lot of other companies are doing a great job. I look at Nike and I don't know, and I look at Starbucks, I don't know, and Facebook, I don't like that brand. LinkedIn, you go across the board. And I think what's really hard is many of these companies have other systemic issues that they're dealing with. Something that Lesley and I heard about our own brand that I thought was really interesting is our brand too nice? Are we just too nice? We're such nice people. Are we too nice to make hard decisions and drive real change? And I'm going to take that to heart because that was really meaningful input. But I don't know right now that there's a gold standard of the brand that's truly doing it right. I think we have to see what the real actions look like coming out of this.
I agree.
Lesley, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I can't say that I've seen anybody emerge as a gold standard. I have seen pockets of what I would say sometimes pockets of brilliance, where you see them do one thing well. I think the opportunity that we have is, and don't get me wrong, because I love my HP Blue, but I do think the opportunity that we have is to elevate in a collective manner in which we bring those gold standards or pockets of brilliance rather, across industries and boil them up to a gold standard that we're all held accountable for. And that's what I would like to see happen. So I can't say that. I can tell you that there are some brands that I'm just really not pleased with. And I can tell you there's some brands that I'm not pleased with that I've supported previously and will no longer. But I think we all have work to do. I think that, and I think that as we approach this work, that we really have to allow some space for, I don't want to say bold and glaring missteps, but the opportunity for people to flex in a different way, because right now we're uncomfortable. As Black Americans, we're uncomfortable having to share our fear, our hurt, our anger, our frustration, And I'll try to speak as white Americans, I think you may be fearful of, I don't want to misstep. I don't know what to say. This is what I hear from my colleagues, from my partners. I don't know what to do. And so we're frozen, you're frozen, and we can't both be frozen. And so we've got to figure out ways as companies. Yes, it's important that your brand is shown in a great light, but more important than that is we solve the problem. And no one company can do that. We couldn't do it in diversity and inclusion. You certainly can't do it with social justice and racial equality. And so we have to figure out how we mobilize and rise to a gold standard that we're all held accountable to.
Mm. No, we didn't talk about microaggressions, and we did get a question about that. You know, some of the expressions of solidarity have included microaggressions, which, you know, the person who asked the question says they attribute to, you know, unconscious bias and lack of awareness in general. What are some of the ways to address this, especially now, you know, that it has been amplified, and we did see, you know, some slacktivism taking place this week, right? That did get some backlash.
Yeah, I think that we're at a place in time where we have to be able to call those things out. In the D&I realm, I always said I'd rather call someone into a conversation than call them out and publicly disgrace, or, you know, all of that. And I still feel that way in a lot of ways around diversity and inclusion in the work that we're doing there. It is about partnership to drive for change. For this issue, around social justice, I think it's a little bit different. I think we have to be bolder. I think we have to be more aggressive. I think that we have to be able to call out those microaggressions that we see as bad examples so that people understand that and show what a good one looks like, right? And so I just think that there's a different tact that is going to happen because we've gotten to the boiling point, right? The breaking point, and we've gotten to that place that enough is enough. It's gonna take on a different form, and more important than that, you have a better opportunity as a power player, white American. The majority, you have the opportunity to be an ally for those microaggressions that we see happen.
You know, and I will say this, because Lesley, you're so right about being frozen and being afraid. And, you know, Lesley taught me and I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Lesley teaches me all the time, but called me out on one personally that I think of myself as a sensitive person, and I was completely wrong. And she told me in the most sensitive of ways, a course correction and something that I needed to say. And it changed my life, and it changed my approach. And I just think that we can't be afraid. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do it wrong. We're in a situation of trauma with the Black community, and we're going to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. But as the white community, we can't stop. We can't stand on the sidelines. We have to educate ourselves. We have to be compassionate. We have to learn. We have to be open. And microaggressions are so real, and they are so hurtful. They're so profoundly hurtful. And it's really hard to get feedback. And we just need to be open to that right now and really be raw to it. And
yeah. We have to be better, as humanity needs to be better. Yeah. And there's, you know, something that comes to mind for me is as we talk about this Black lives versus all lives, like we can't get to all lives until we deal with Black lives in this moment. And that's one of the challenges that we face, is that that people have to figure out, you have to educate yourself and get to a place of understanding why that statement is the make or break of us. It is, we talk about the digital divide. It is the divisiveness of our country and our world, for that matter. In every society across the globe, darker skinned people are fundamentally marginalized, more marginalized than other groups of people. Why is that? And we have to be able to start looking at that and talking about it and dealing with it in order for all lives to truly matter and get to that place.
Ladies, I'm gonna jump in here.
No, we're just going good, Ness.
I know you guys. This is. I hope team on the phone, on the Zoom. I hope you are really getting as much out of this as I am. I think it's important though that you guys understand that this is a place where we get our energy every week. And so what I want to hear from you is, in the spirit of practical advice, you are speaking to a number of people who are trained to be in the background, who are trained to be the collective conscience of companies, of NGOs, of other executives and their voices. We are also diplomacy experts in that we tend to let things go, right? I'm gonna be real here. How many times have you sat in the room and listened to somebody that said something inappropriate and let it ride? Mm-hmm. What is your advice to all of us? What should we personally be doing? Calling people out. I heard that a number of times. What is your advice to us?
Lesley, you want to go first?
I'm sorry, Karen, if you could, Enrique's asking a quick question I gotta address. I'm sorry.
That's no problem. You know, my honest advice, because we're speaking to communicators, is don't mistake good communication for action. There's a really big difference. And writing well on behalf of our companies and writing well on behalf of our executives is very different from corporate policies and procedures and actions on behalf of our brands. They're really different. And as communicators, we need to stand up for the companies and the executives that we're working with to say, this is just a message, or I can't write this kind of message if we don't have demonstrable action that we're putting behind it. It will backfire, because it will.
Yeah. And Ness, I'm so sorry. There was a urgent question I needed to respond to Enrique.
What advice do you have?
Advice do I have for solving this problem overall, or?
Well, for communicators.
For communicators. Okay, so for communicators, I think accountability. I think it is the hold people to standards as you think about reporting. It's one thing to say, oh, we're giving this company X amount of dollars, and it's just like, wow, that's a lot of money. But what are you going to do? How are you measuring what the company will do with those dollars and the impact ultimately that it can have, and you're striving for. And so I just think, gosh, you have a beautiful opportunity as communicators to really lead the way and help guide us through that shift, Aarti, that we talked about, from diversity and inclusion and belonging is still important. It will always be important. But how do we shift to this social justice? How do we shift to this racial equality? And then what are we doing to connect the dots so that we do get to a level of gold standard and what a gold standard should look like? I think that's what would be really, really helpful.
My only other quick thing, I know you only wanted one bit of advice, but I'll just give you one other bit of advice for the senior leaders on this call. You know, stand up for underserved, stand up for people. You know, so often we've been in meetings and we hear something and it might sound a little tone deaf and you don't catch it in the moment. Just be really present, be vigilant, because there are people in our meetings that might not necessarily know how to stand up for themselves or stand up for power or stand up to authority. Be present in the moment and call shit out, and call it out fast, whether you call it out publicly or privately. I think that there are a lot of people that suffer in pain, and Lesley and I have talked about that, get off a Zoom call and feel really offended and don't say anything. And that's the kind of stuff that erodes our cultures. It erodes people's sense of themselves, their confidence. And I would encourage senior people to be extraordinarily mindful and make courageous decisions to call out bad behavior.
And I think as communicators also, to be able to share those types of stories of what good behavior looks like and elevate those would be helpful as well.
That's such a nicer way to say it.
Well, one thing I've seen in the industry is that the ones who are most successful at dealing with this issue are the ones willing to be uncomfortable. So I would really, tell folks, everyone on this call, like, be willing to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's my small piece of advice. And
thank you.
Yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
yes, exactly.
That's the new normal.
Ride. We're going to be on this ride together and approach it with, I like to use the word grace, because it'll get a little, it will make a shift a little bit in our seat.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to have all of you back in a few months' time. A lot of change is about to happen. We are in the middle of it. Thank you, Karen Kahn, Chief Brand and Communications Officer, HP, Lesley Slaton Brown, HP's Chief Diversity Officer, and our moderator, Aarti Shah from Provoke Media. Thank you all, and especially thank you to this community who shows up every week and brings it. Guess what? We're here for you. If you are in need, you have free membership right now in PRSA. Contact me. Blow up my phone. Also, Ellie Javadi too. Thank you to our board members, and certainly thank you to the Friday Forum team. Oh, look at us. There we are. Hi. And we've got a whole summer of programming. So thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you
Vanessa.
for the extra 3 minutes.
Thanks.
Great job. Great job,
Thank you for
Vanessa.
having us.
If anyone has more to say on this topic and wants a bigger platform, please contact me at Provoke with Amplify Voices as well. So yes, please, Vanessa knows how to get in touch with me.
I am here
Thanks,
for.
Aarti. Thank you, Lesley.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, shit.
So good, Vanessa. So good.
Thank you.